Hey, what is up, guys? This is Larry, and today I want to talk about something that I believe is a lot more prevalent of an issue than most people believe, and that's dealing with the imposter syndrome, which, I'm going to talk about it from a personal experience, how I dealt with it in college, as well as how I dealt with it in a professional setting, which in my case would be finance and accounting. And I hope by kind of giving my own personal perspective on how I encountered imposter syndrome and how I dealt with it, that may be able to better help somebody else out there. Because I kind of believe that that's how we can best overcome imposter syndrome, is by talking it out, realizing that there's plenty of other people that are feeling the exact same feelings that you may be feeling or that I felt throughout college and throughout my professional career. I'll start with how I dealt with it in college. And in college specifically, it kind of actually ended up playing out to my benefit a little bit. But when I was in college, my first original majors were going to be math and physics. I thought I was going to double major and minor in computer science. And I remember sitting in a math class, and I had always been good at math throughout high school, but it was nothing I was actually really that passionate about. And I remember sitting in this calculus class or something, and I just remember all these people that I thought were brilliant, very smart, very passionate, and any example that the professor would give, they were able to solve it right away or give at least some kind of input into that math problem. And I just thought that I didn't necessarily fit the, group that I was in. I thought everybody was way smarter than me, and I kind of ended up second guessing math and physics, and I ended up changing my major throughout my college experience. And that ended up working out well for me because in my case, math and physics wasn't actually really what I was passionate about. But in retrospect, I kind of look back in it and I kind of think about it and why I felt kind of embarrassed with my own math knowledge. And I think it's kind of the problem with and why imposter syndrome kind of happens is just for me, for example, if I'm in a class of 99 other kids, and so it's a class of 100 people, if every day a different student kind of said something brilliant, they said something really smart in that math class, then, I'm sitting in that class every day feeling, less and less significant, even though it's not the same person, it's a different person every single day. It's not the same person that's, a genius. It's just, a fluke in some cases. You could probably better relate this to social media as a really great example. If you follow, let's just say 400 people, which, plenty of people out there follow more than 400 people, then every single day, a different person could just be doing that one thing out of the year that was special. Maybe they're, doing something big for their birthday. And that would mean every single day, you would at least at a minimum have one person kind of post some kind of picture or something really interesting in their day-to-day life. So every single day, I'm kind of getting reminded about how, insignificant my day is or how insignificant my life is and how I'm not doing anything special. So it's probably a little bit better of a way to relate it back to that math class. In that math class, it's not necessarily that every single person in that class could solve the complex math problem of that day. It just so happens that one particular day, it just kind of clicked in their mind. And what I kind of find more interesting about this as well is that every single day, everybody else is kind of feeling that same thing as well. Back to that social media example, that one friend that you had post on, in the beginning of January that posted some kind of fun, interesting, special occasion that they did, because they don't end up posting throughout the year. Maybe by the end of the year, they're already kind of feeling insignificant as well, that their life isn't as interesting. So it's kind of, everybody is also experiencing the same imposter syndrome in different ways and to different degrees. So to kind of tie this back to finance and a professional career, I kind of think about, this. I used to work in an accounting firm for a little while there. And, you end up using Excel and different programs all the time, and you end up having to know these different accounting rules all the time. And every now and then I would forget some of these rules or forget, how to do something in Excel. And I would go talk to somebody, and it would just seem that right away they knew how to do it, and they knew, exactly how to explain it, how to show me this, complex Excel formula that they want me to use. And I was always amazed and felt, that I was kind of insignificant or I wasn't smart enough because the person I asked that day knew it right away. But what I think we kind of don't realize is that maybe that person that I asked, hey, how do you use this formula in Excel? Maybe they researched it just the day before because they were struggling with it as well. And so that kind of, is interesting because we don't necessarily know what everybody else is going through, what everybody else is feeling, which once again was why I think talking about the imposter syndrome, talking about how, you personally had it and how you coped with it can better help others out there deal with the imposter syndrome. I think there's a lot of different reasons on why the imposter syndrome happens to different individuals. Sometimes it can be how you coped with, recognition when you were younger, or perhaps I think as far as society as a whole, it really has to deal with this pressure of, needing to succeed and needing to be better and distinguishing yourself. You can't be normal or you can't be below average. That'd be the worst case scenario is if you're below average. And that's a societal pressure there kind of telling you can't be, average. But the truth is, everybody has different things that they excel at and things that they don't necessarily excel at. And even that statement right there in itself, right, that kind of gives this pressure that, hey, you better have something that you excel at. And so once again, you start to feel this pressure. And I don't necessarily mean that. I just mean that everybody does have something deep down that makes them unique that they excel at. Maybe it's just being them. That's totally fine too. But the point I'm trying to make is that this pressure ends up kind of making us feel that we're insignificant or that we're not good enough or that we're not smart enough. And I think probably a prime example of that is if I know something, if I've studied something very well and I know this, math problem, if I know it very well and I know how to solve it, but yet, I get called into the front of class to explain it, or same thing, in a professional setting. Maybe it's a presentation I'm giving to different work colleagues and I have to present it to the president of the company. That pressure ends up making me feel like I don't know my stuff, that I don't know what I'm talking about. And so that kind of really illustrates how the imposter syndrome is just a byproduct of societal pressure, just causing you, pushing you to want to succeed more and more. And I think to add to this, that's kind of interesting is think about somebody that you idolize or that you aspire to be. These people you kind of idealize in your mind. If I aspire to be, just an example, Albert Einstein, I want to be as smart as him. And even if I end up being, I have the same genius and same level of, knowledge that he does, I may feel I may still feel like that imposter syndrome. And the reason being is that I know my flaws that I have. So even if I have the same intelligence as him, I feel like, well, I also have these flaws, so I'm not necessarily as good as him. Because in your mind, you're not necessarily thinking about all the flaws that Albert Einstein may have had. And so if you knew about those different flaws, then maybe you would feel a little bit better about yourself. And that same thing applies, in school and the professional field, everything, day-to-day life. What we see in people's day-to-day life, even in a professional setting, in a career path, or even in a classroom in college, those are examples. Those are just like little glimpses into people's lives. You don't necessarily know what they're dealing with, and when you're not seeing them or you're not necessarily knowing their flaws and their mistakes, perhaps they're making a ton of different mistakes, but you're just not necessarily aware of it. And they kind of put on this show for you because I think we're all dealing with the same societal pressure, and that ends up kind of just compounding the effects of imposter syndrome. So I definitely think talking about it really can help deal with that imposter syndrome. And what I would encourage a lot of people not to do is I feel like a lot of people out there just kind of end up checking themselves out, right? You feel like a fraud, you feel like a failure. So rather than kind of try to improve yourself or rather than try to talk it out with somebody, you just end up checking out altogether. And that's definitely a mistake because all it does is just increases that problem down the road, because the more and more you check out, the more and more you find yourself just kind of spending your time on social media, feeling like, wow, look at, I'm only confirming what I already believe, which is everybody else has such a great life and I don't. But what I think is a lot more common than people believe is that people really, really try to put on a show for others. If I'm going to, I talk in finance a lot. If I'm going to talk about my financial credentials, I'm probably going to, make it seem a lot better than it actually is. Rather than say, my net worth is $10,000, I'll round up and say my net worth is $100,000, and that makes me seem more credible. But then the problem is that if everybody is doing that, then you start to feel insignificant, right? When in reality, well, my net worth is only $2,000. Everybody out there is saying they're $100,000 or that everybody's a millionaire, before they're in their 30s. Then you start to feel like a failure. And the same is true in school as well. You see people, you don't necessarily know where they got that nice shirt from or that nice car from. You don't know if it was their parents that bought it for them, or you don't necessarily know if they're in debt to buy a nice fancy car. So then what ends up happening is you just kind of idealize the situation, right? If somebody's driving a really nice car, you assume that they paid it in full, they can afford it. But that might not actually be the case. Maybe they're in a significant amount of debt just to get that car because they're trying to impress other people. So I guess what I would just kind of end this all with saying is just kind of make sure you find a group of friends that you can talk about this with and try to be as honest as possible, right? The more honest you're with them, the more comfortable they'll feel, and the more honest they'll be back in return. And same thing with coworkers in a career setting. The more honest you can be with them and kind of ask in a honest way, hey, how do you feel? Like, do you ever feel like an imposter at times? Do you ever feel like you don't know what you're talking about? And I've actually had this conversation with my own boss, which, may seem weird, but I have a pretty good relationship with my boss. And same thing. I mean, we talk about how all the time we end up not knowing how to do different things in Excel and we have to Google it. And, that's a lot more common than you may think. The same could be said for whatever you may be studying or whatever career path you're taking. I think you'd find a lot more people end up kind of Googling something right before they're trying to present it or whatever. So everybody ends up seeming a lot smarter than they actually are. And that's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but I do think we all have to acknowledge it so that way we can kind of heal from this imposter syndrome. So before I end this video, if you felt imposter syndrome in any way, just comment down below your own personal story, and hopefully that can kind of help others recognize that you're not necessarily alone in this type situation. And if you appreciate this video at all, please give it a big thumbs up. I'd appreciate it a lot. And if you like personal finance or anything economics related or even behavioral economics related, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more.